77 to 78% nitrogen, N2. Can't I just take a nice deep breath of air and build protein? Can you do that, Charlie?
No, I'm sure not.
Why not?
Because it needs more than nitrogen.
Okay. This is not the form of nitrogen that your cells are able to utilize to turn into that. About 21% of our atmosphere is O2. Always diatomic. One oxygen is always hooked to another oxygen, so it's always O2. 0.03% CO2. Is that going up or down? Yeah. Then we have some argon and others. The nitrogen in our atmosphere is not the form of nitrogen that our cells can utilize to build proteins. However, we were talking about legumes and their ability to fix nitrogen. That's what they're fixing. The bacteria in the roots of things like peanuts and soybeans are able to take the N2 and turn it into a form that the plant cells can use. It has its own little greenhouse fertilizer factory. That is the fixing of nitrogen.
So what can we use? N1 or N,
What can we use?
what kind of nitrogen?
Oh, NO3s. We need to hook some oxygens on there. So within our system, nutrients, now that we talked about what nutrients are and what our atmosphere is, nutrients are reused. Remember what nutrients are: elements and molecules essential to life. Nutrients cycle. There's the operative word. Within an ecosystem. Nutrients cycle within an ecosystem. The calcium in your bones is the calcium that has been on this planet for 4.6 billion years. It has been used in countless of other bodies. That explains all the voices. All the voices in your head. You have elements that have been parts of worms, parts of dinosaurs. All of the elements in your body that make up you have been used millions of times before. Constantly reused. And this is just one of the cycles, showing the carbon cycle. The only process in nature that takes in carbon is photosynthesis. It's the only process that takes in carbon. All the other processes break the molecules apart and release carbon. So it's a one-way. As our population increases, the number of people on the planet requiring food and housing increases. If they need room, you need to cut down plants to make room for them. Fewer plants, more people, you have a disruption. It's just a simple balance or imbalance. Here's the other cycle. Nitrogen. You have to have nitrogen. Why do you need nitrogen? Nitrogen is essential to make what kind of molecule? Protein. You have to have nitrogen. And this is one thing I should have said. Nitrogen is the element that is usually the most limiting. If an organism is not growing, is not thriving, you look to see if it's getting enough nitrogen. Nitrogen is usually the element that is limiting. So we're seeing the reservoir in the atmosphere, N2, going down to the nitrates. The denitrifying bacteria in the soil can change NO3 back into N2, get the oxygen onto that. Okay, here's your water. Water, molecule. Molecular formula is what? Okay, so there's the molecular formula. This is what water looks like. My little squiggly lines are lowercase delta? Lowercase delta or lowercase gamma?
It's
Can't see it.
It's a delta.
Lowercase delta. Lowercase delta means it has a partial charge. Water is polar, kind of like a roommate I once had. It has a partial negative side and a partial positive side. Because water is like that, life as we know it can exist. Because water is polar, life as we know it. If you talk to the late Carl Sagan, which would take, it'd be a trip, but if we could talk to Carl Sagan, he'd say, well, there may be other kinds of life. Life as we know it exists because water is polar. Because water will stick to itself, like this. The slightly positive side of one water molecule will stick to the slightly negative side of another water molecule. Water will stick to itself and cause surface tension. Will water stick to other things? Does water stick to
Not
fabric?
really, no.
It depends.
Well, it depends, but that's part of why it can be the universal solvent and be so slick and smooth and let go of things or combine with them and then let them go and evaporate. And it's also partially probably why it's the one thing that when it gets colder, it expands instead of contracting.
Mhm.
At a point.
Okay, will water stick to other things? Will water stick to, say you've got a cotton towel. Will water stick to your cotton towel? Yes. Okay, so will water stick to a sheet of saran wrap?
No.
Why not? This one, you want this one, Charlie?
Well, you assume the properties.
Saran wrap, wax, oil, petroleum products have no charge. They're neutrally charged. This is why you use them, like rubber, to surround wire. No charge, will not conduct. Water has nothing to stick to. If there's no charge, like in wax, if it's electrically neutral, there's nothing to stick to, it just rolls off. If the surface has a charge, whether it's positive or negative, doesn't matter, water will stick to it. Will it be a strong stick? No. Because this is a partial negative and a partial positive. It's weak. You can get water to go flying because it doesn't stick very hard. An ecological system, available water versus unavailable water. Here we go. Take a look over on the left at our column. We have oceans make up, of the water on the planet, oceans make up 96.5% of all the water. Look at the very top, very, very, very tippy top. The blue is the fresh water. We've got a little line of brown and a little line of turquoise. Little line of brown is the saline underground water. Little line of turquoise is the saline lakes. At the very top of all the water on the planet, 2.5% of it is fresh water. Now, taking that little line, here we go, the fresh water, breaking it down, most of the fresh water is in glaciers and ice caps. 30% of our fresh water is in groundwater. That little tippy top there is what's available. 1.3% take that down over here. 1.3%. We have ice and snow, 73% lakes, atmospheric water, biological water, rivers, swamps, marshes, soil moisture. We don't have just a whole lot of available water is the upshot. Clean, available water. Not much. Okay, let me see. Oh, we're almost done. Okay, we'll finish this. succession. Succession is the change, and this is mainly in plants, the change in a plant community over time. That's the definition. We have two different types of succession. Primary succession go to the next slide. Primary succession is looking at the development of soils, the introduction of new plants onto a new soil, the pioneer plants getting replaced by secondary plants and eventually being replaced by the climax community. So if we could start with rock and then go to the first kinds of organisms that live on a rock are lichens. Lichens are algae and fungus living together, living off of each other. They need nothing from the rock. They just are using the rock as a surface. When the lichens die, they provide our first soil. We have our first organic matter when the lichens die, and you might have some grass grow on that. Now succession tells us it depends on where it is. If the grass is the climax community, then it stops there. But then you might have sapling trees. And then you might have, as your climax community, you might have hardwood forest. Here, the climax community is supposed to be grass and wildflowers. That would be our climax community. Most of the time, we're dealing with this. This is secondary succession. Secondary succession is what happens to an area when all of the vegetation is removed, but the soil stays. So vegetation removed, soil remains. You've got the entire seed bank still left in the soil, but you don't have any of the competition factors left on the surface. So the plants are going to, especially the ones that grow fast, your C4 plants, and we'll talk about that later. The C4 plants grow rapidly, but they probably cannot maintain that dominance. They're going to be taken over, but notice weeds. You've removed all of the plants, then you have pine saplings, young pine forest, mature hardwood forest. That's what happens when you have a disturbance. Cultivation at the bottom, years after cultivation. So they had plowed the ground, removed all the vegetation, and then they left it fallow. And it goes back. So over time, it's going to go from weeds to pine trees, and then finally hardwood. Here, we're having an influx in our, look at this, in our grasslands with trees. Not because trees are the climax community, but because we have such a huge amount of seed base coming in from around us. We have all these seeds, all of this pollen coming in, and it's finding a fertile base, especially in the absence of fire. Fire is a natural component of maintaining a prairie. In the absence of fire, the trees get established. If the trees can find access to water, they will maintain their establishment.